when we were approached by the World Council of Churches, there was an interest in understanding what local faith communities, what local Christian communities could do and were already doing to address stigma and discrimination that people living with or affected by HIV face, and how congregations can support people living with HIV to be places of welcome and hospitality, and to be resources in local communities and instruments in local communities to address inequality, to be a kind of vision for justice and equality in local communities, especially for those most marginalized and stigmatized. And so the congregational case study was developed to understand what congregations do to identify the best practices in their ministries that could then be articulated and highlighted so that more Christian communities could carry out those kinds of ministries and programs, and best practices could be replicated with support of EHIA and EAA.
Good afternoon. The Stigma and Discrimination Committee was able to outline the current study that we're doing, and then actually have a really in-depth discussion about how those stories about best practices might be best used. To outline the study, we talked about how we're going to engage leaders of anti-stigma work in congregations. We have found 9 of 10 congregations in different countries that will present and answer the questionnaires and do a qualitative interview. That seemed to be a really good place to start. And we went much further than that in the discussion about how a qualitative study could be helpful in shifting some of the most prominent faith leaders to be more compassionate and to actually address the stigma that they have been possibly supporting or maybe even enacting.
Yes, to me, I'm Josephine. The stigma in the congregation is still there, but we have to register the good practices. The misconception is not far. It is within us, and we need to tackle it and go out to do some work. I, for one, visited the sex workers during the COVID season to bridge the gap and see and talk to them about the safe practices. What I realized is that these people are within us. When I was introducing myself and my fellow members in the Mothers Union uniform, they said, yes, we know Mothers Union. One of them even confessed and said that the father is a clergy. You can imagine how this can happen. So what we can do as per now, as members, one is to break the silence, two, to bridge the gap, to talk to these people, to help them come out with the good practices, and above all, to make sure that the other congregations know what is happening there and even help them to start up their life well and properly.
In the Philippines, we had our good practice in combating stigma and discrimination within the churches was, it started when we found INRELA's curriculum on dealing with HIV. And it was the first time that churches softened up against the resistance of any material that was about sexuality and HIV. Because it came from Africa. Because the resistance comes from our colonial heritage, that anything that comes from North America or Europe is something that comes from our colonial past of just adopting things that are not really our context. So I think it is very important that in developing countries would have this sense of familiarity of the where a material comes from. So I think what this study can contribute is highlighting the best practices in similar contexts that we have would feed into the current work that we are doing and develop it more and feel a better solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the same context all around the world.
About the theological institution, we observe that in the Francophone part, we must do much better work about HIV issues. And we have many professors come to do a lot of work in DRC about HIV issues, like Professor Dube. But the problem we have on the ground is we have the newest staff who didn't know the work about Musa Dube did in DRC. That's why they are not integrate HIV curriculum on Theological Institute like the YCC approach, but they use the approach of the Ministry of National Education. That is the problem we have. Then we must to restart again the work of integrate HIV on the theological institution.
We are so excited about the theme of the assembly, the love of Christ, reconciling and uniting communities. We've had HIV/AIDS for engaging with it from 1990s up to now. We have produced a tool between that has been supported by a combination of UNAIDS, World Council of Churches, and religious leaders living with HIV, a tool that measures the stigma, the shame, the denial, the discrimination, the inaction and misaction around AIDS. We want to find out from this study, are there some things that churches have done well and have produced good results? Or are there some things that we have invested in thinking that they deliver good results when actually they make things worse? Are there some things we need to drop or invest in more? So we want, this study is going to be helpful to faith communities and congregations that are really tuned into doing AIDS work in a way that is better, in a way that is faster, but in a way that also that is more partnering with others. We want to find, and we know, we are looking forward that once the assembly happens and we share this tool, this study, the results can engage even more populations. We are looking forward to a continued partnership with the academia and with the faith communities and religious leaders and faith communities living with HIV and impacted by HIV. We know that by 2030, once we continue this cooperation, we will be in the records of people, of communities which engaged well, because we studied well the problem and we gave it adequate solutions. Thank you very much.